Every change, every lasting change can only happen when we make the changes in us. Like any political structure cannot survive as long as people are traumatized.
Hello, and welcome to the Flying Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. Recently, I had the chance to interview the talented Anne Siems. Anne is a Seattle-based artist who creates paintings of tattooed women which explore the ideals of femininity in the contemporary era, and she recently created a large-scale mural during the current pandemic. This is hopefully the first interview of many, so I hope you enjoy it. I think the best place to start, let's start at the beginning, so introduce yourself slightly and how you became an artist, what inspired you to become an artist.
I started painting when I was really little. My dad is an art teacher, and he always gave me tons of material, like large brushes, big pieces of paper. I don't think I ever had a coloring book. That was not something that interested them for us. We were just like painting with our fingers, painting with big brushes, always had lots of material and room to stretch out. So a lot of work was done on the floor, and it was just always supported in my family, as well as them taking us to, to exhibits and into churches with interesting art. We lived in Argentina for 3 years, and we did some work there. We looked at work there and really got a very broad artistic education, I would say. My dad never, the nice thing was, even though he was an art teacher, he never suggested projects or said, a tree really looks like this, or let me show you. He would just throw the material at us. My sister was drawing and painting too, and just let us do, and then hang the work up, which was a sign that he enjoyed it, and gives you as a kid positive feedback. But there was never any direction and any control or any wanting a specific outcome. And so I think that allowed us to work very freely. That kind of started me to basically, in my pastime as a hobby, like I just loved sitting for hours drawing kind of like often like what interested me, and what kind of like I really got into horses as a kid. And so I would just, make these dream scenarios of the horse farm I would own, and huge drawings sometimes with lots of detail and speech bubbles, and just really really loved very intricate, especially drawing later with just pencil and paper. As kids in particular, we loved markers. Markers were kind of like, back in the 70s, that was kind of a new thing. My parents hadn't had markers when they were children, so colored markers were like a big deal for us. And then I went after high school, after A levels, I guess, in Britain. I decided that I wanted to apply at the Berlin Art School, and probably somewhat similar to Great Britain, there's really just state schools. There aren't really private schools. There isn't like here universities and private art schools. But I did make it in there, and so.
Well, clearly impressed somebody. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it. So.
And I had a really good portfolio too. I had others that had entered the school kind of give me some ideas what needed to be in the portfolio, and so I think I exhibited, like when we did still lives, I did something that was, they were objects that really had sort of a life of their own and interested me. So there was just, like I picked a lot of antiques, and I think there was something more interesting than an apple and a pear and a wine bottle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very much so. And actually, that's going to lead on to my actual next question, is about art education. Like, do you believe in art education? Is it important for people to be educated if they want to be an artist?
I am not sure that the formal education is necessarily the best. My experience at my school was terrible. And the reason being is that it was a very misogynist club of older men who were established artists, big names, very big names, nationally, internationally known names, who had all tenure, who could do whatever or as little as they wanted to do with their students, and who, in a way, really didn't give, excuse me, a fuck if unless sort of they had particular interest in one art in one of their students, mostly because their work was a lot like theirs, or they had intercourse with them. I mean, it was just there was for the longest time there was not a single female professor there, and of course the majority of students were women, and it was so neglectful there, and there really weren't any like formal critiques or kind of like a kind of a curriculum. You were basically just thrown into a big studio with the other students and just like, well, go ahead and paint, be wild and expressive, and huge canvases with oil paint. That was kind of the thing in my class. And you couldn't really go to other art professors in the school because you were expected to only be with your master teacher, which also seemed very limiting. I do think there are art schools that are excellent where people get an amazing education and really have an amazing rapport with their teacher and have a connection. I only got to experience that briefly when I was an exchange student at a very small university in Tennessee, in which unfortunately there were only really two serious art students, and I was one of them.
That's a good thing. That's
So
at least you take it
yeah,
seriously. I think that's also the problem is that I think particularly in schools, people don't take art and creativity and creative endeavors seriously. It's just seen as like, oh, we'll just mess about whilst we'll just go in and mess about and the teacher's just going to just not do anything. And I think that's a big shame because I think creative jobs in the creative industry is important, more important than people even think about or even realize. And if you took art away, what would you have? Like, what would you have? I mean, but do you think art is something that can actually be taught, or do you think it's more self-development?
I think it's a mix. I would think that I could be a better painter or a more maybe more skilled if I had had a more formal training. But on the other hand, I also think that what I developed is sort of my very unique style that comes out of almost being self-taught. I mean, really, sometimes people have approached me and said, "Yeah, I can really see your classic training." And I'm going, I had none. Like for my portfolio in the first 6 months, I had to take some figure drawing classes. And as soon as the requirements were dropped, I just did whatever I wanted. And there's something to be said for really knowing anatomy and that, so it's a mixed bag. I don't know that I think what is more important when you go to art school is that you have exposure and community with other artists, and that you really learn something about critiquing and observing art, much less so than um, learning the formalities of it. I find that people that are drawn to like the very classical art schools where they're learning, oil paint and egg tempera and classical figure and whatever. I often don't see they can technically paint really well, but I don't see anything interesting actually happening in the artwork itself. Like it looks like a replica of a gazillion other things that I've seen before. And if there was something that I find beneficial to the school that I was at, other than that it was utterly neglectful and the energy there was very unpleasant. I had a container in which I was sort of had permission to work because I knew I wanted my art degree. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to finish that school. And I was, and I still am, I'm just very driven. And so I think one of the most important ingredients in becoming an artist is you have to have that drive. You have to be almost, you have to be a little obsessive compulsive with it. I think I have a tendency of that. I'm the same with teeth flossing. I just like, I gotta have my dental floss, like in every
Yeah, of
bag.
course. I think it's important. It's important to have things obviously you care about and that you need to do. I think
Yeah.
art's definitely something that I think more people should be just a lot more caring towards and consider it, particularly nowadays with obviously the world situation we're currently in. How has that affected you? Are you doing well? Are things going okay? Are you being
With
productive?
COVID, you mean?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Luckily, I have been able to still sell artwork. It's been actually busier than usual, not necessarily because I'm selling more, but because the galleries are asking all their artists to give them additional, like, you know, um, video material and more imagery and more interviews and studio visits that are online. And so it still is very busy. Um, you know, that said, I obviously am mostly working for a luxury market. Rich people have not gotten poorer. We know the richest have gotten even richer from the pandemic. I do always aim to have something for every income. So I do the prints that cost under $100, and my smallest drawings cost 700. That's I think in a lot of people's budget these days, not in everyone's. I Of course, I even have been selling prints for $30 as a fundraiser, and just so that it's important to me that it stays accessible as best as possible. Um, and I have, of course, as an artist that works alone, I'm really used to spending a lot of alone time, and so I can't imagine how hard it must be for people that really thrive in a work where they have coworkers that they meet all the time, and there's just a sense of community, even if they maybe often don't like it or bitch about work. But I bet that's really hard. Whereas I'm used to being on my own, and I kind of thrive on that that seclusion, because I would not want to work in like a community studio. It's just not something that has ever interested me. But other than that, of course, the isolation has been hard. It's very hard. I'm in my own bubble.
And even though there is that myth of the artist being the lone wolf, but it's like it's not just down to you. There are other people involved in obviously being an artist. It's not just a one person thing, really.
Yeah,
I think people don't realize how hard it actually is. And you have to make connections, you have to meet people. You can't just sit at home. As That's the interesting thing, is that there's a big myth that like to be an artist, all you have to do is sit at home, draw, post your work online, get a big following and make money off it, and that's it. But actually there's so many layers underneath it. And you have to have a community, and you have to actually care about the people who actually communicate with you, because at the end of the day, it's like if you don't care about your audience that are following you, they're putting you on this pedestal. As you said, your work is for a luxury market. You know, you want to make sure that people are getting that. I
yeah,
think it's an interesting point you raised, I must say. So actually, let's get to talk about your work. So in your bio, it was actually quite interesting. You actually said that you used to create something very different. You used to create images of like anatomy and botany, and now obviously you
mhm,
create these really interesting tattooed women, these portraits. Could you talk a bit about how your ideas and development changed over the years, and why? And
just kind of found my own style with like small brushes and with ink pens, and there were sort of these layers and layers of sketches. And when I started to showing these to galleries, and back then I seriously just like, I would walk with my drawings under my arm and just show them in a gallery. I mean, I just felt like, why the heck not? This is really what it looks like. It's so much better to see it in person. and
absolutely.
and just found my first gallery here and then in Portland. Anyway, from that style, I eventually became. I had a moment where I was just sort of like feeling, okay, I'm done with this. I don't know where I want to move forward, and I did The Artist's Way, and that's a really well known book. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah. So I did like sort of, I think it's a 10-week course, so I can't remember, where you do a ton of writing and certain exercises. And I think I pretty much let my work rest for that time. I don't recall now, it's been too long. And out of it came a much more painterly style. Still working on paper, but it had more sort of a feeling that was reminiscent of sort of um, retablos and sort of Mexican naive old Spanish work too, that was sort of in churches and such. And it just kind of like evolved from there, where then eventually I felt comfortable drawing figures. And um, then there was sort of a little bit of a break where I started doing these translucent dresses, and all this work was still on the paper bags that I sewed together and waxed, and then worked with layers of acrylic on it. And I started doing sort of these see-through dresses that were sort of stand-ins for the body, um, and slowly evolved more into figures, was comfortable drawing faces. And each phase just always had its sort of natural end, where at some point I just felt like, okay, I'm bored with this. Like, I need to find how I want to move from there. And while I was pregnant, I started to suddenly feel like I need to work on panel. I'm done working on paper. And once I worked on paper, I suddenly had a smooth surface because the paper was always a little bit wrinkly. And so it never really allowed for very fine detail. I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's just what I wanted to do. It wouldn't have worked well on paper, it would have kind of looked warped. And so I started working on panel, and that just sort of naturally opened me into a new style of painting that became much more realistic, where I was using a lot of old master paintings as sort of material to work these landscapes, and much more representational, sort of still lives with bodies next to them. I mean, with people next to them, mostly women or children. And and that's kind of like how I slowly moved from one thing to the next. And then, as I write in the as I've written in my bio, is that once President Trump was voted in, I just the bottom fell out for me. I just woke out of my Sleeping Beauty sleep in a way, which, thank God. I mean, it's not that I wasn't politically completely ignorant, or, but, everything that really didn't immediately affect me intensely just wasn't really so much on my radar. And
Yes.
um, I'd always been a feminist. I've always been engaged and always have supported, Greenpeace and other political organizations like Doctors Without Borders and Amnesty and things like that, because my parents are also very politically active and have always, educated us in those ways, my sister and I. And then with Trump, just, excuse my French, but the shit just hit the fan. And it was a really good wake up call. It was kind of like taking a really bad homeopathic remedy that just like woke everybody, every white liberal person, well, not every, but way more up into going, holy cow, what's going on with this country? Where are all these haters coming from? And this is just terrible. And really understanding Black Lives Matter, and really digging deeper into Me Too, and just like so much started to be, I mean, so beautifully started to become like counter this wave of fascism, and hatred, and white supremacy and misogyny that was just suddenly so blatantly out there and supported by a president of a country. Just unbelievable. So it was really an emotional painting these bucolic landscapes with children, as much as they were always a little edgy and odd, depending if, some people were just like, oh, I like your how whimsical they are. And I'm going, yeah, but they're also kind of a little creepy, like if you're really paying attention. But people see what they want to see, but I just could not do that anymore. And I mean, to this day, people are always like, they just fawn over those fairy tale images. And I'm just going, like, I'm sorry, this phase is done,
I
like,
think it's natural. I think, fairy tales is very like escapism, and the way the world is, like, the way obviously where Trump was, president stuff. It's like people need stuff to escape, and I think art's probably a good kind of conduit for that, I guess. So
Yeah,
yeah, I can see why
yeah,
people, and not just that, like people love fairy tales. That's just how it is.
yeah.
People just
It-
do. So how so
yeah.
how did you decide which direction to go in next?
Well, it just kind of slowly evolved. It was really quite a battle for a while. First, I was almost just doing abstract work and just kept the faces in there. Then I slowly moved into working with bodies again, but they were naked but transparently painted, so not fleshy. And then I started to kind of finally, I think it was after about 2 years of Trump, I started to really kind of have fun with painting these women again, but they were modern women. They had modern clothes or contemporary clothes on, a little bit of a nostalgia dress of my youth, or my childhood more, like, kind of sort of Mari Mako, mod 60s, 70s sort of outfits. And I changed their hair, and, where it became just kind of two-dimensional versus three-dimensionality. And I played around a lot, and I still do with the backgrounds, where sometimes I'm more representational, sometimes it's very abstract, sometimes it's just sort of color field. And I don't really know when the tattoos came into play, but what I love about them, I mean, I can look when I started them, obviously, but I just started being interested in tattoos. And, whereas before I had never wanted a tattoo. And then I started being interested in getting a tattoo. I was doing a lot of personal spiritual work, and with sort of each sort of teaching and session that I was finished, I felt like there was a new shift in my life, and I wanted to record that on my body in some way, as a reminder, as a symbol. And then the tattoos started to come up as kind of another way again to tell a little sub story, or you know let them speak without having a lot of sort of creatures or things around the figures, but instead the whimsical, let's call it that, is on their bodies. Is like my love for botanical illustration, for medieval imagery, for outsider art, for graphic linear work, kind of found its playground on their skin. And um, and the women are not smiling. They're not in dresses in which they can't walk. They are often almost naked. And there's a rawness about tattoos and women that are, I mean, about men too that are tattooed. I mean, there's just something. It's 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 more than a fashion statement. It's a rite of passage, and I think it expresses our longing for tribalism, and a way to go through ritual, to go through ceremony. And that's sort of the niche that tattooing has created or has fulfilled. Because I know when I just got my last tattoo, I don't know if that'll be my last one ever, but I haven't planned on any others. My mom was like, or my sister said, "You're not going to get tattooed all over, are you?" Don't think so, but it is painful. It is really painful. I I definitely just, it's something it's sort of an ordeal, in a certain way.
Yeah, I guess that's the whole point of it. Like, yeah, I guess the whole point of it, isn't it? Really, it's yeah, that you earn it in that respect.
Yeah. And so then the sort of the last thing that sort of happened for me at the, like, sort of last fall around this time, was that I wanted to see, like, I had always been comfortable with a certain size that the face is in the, and I think every artist, like, sometimes people said, "Oh, can you do this painting, like something that was like 60 by 60, and just make it a lot smaller?" I'm like, I'm not a miniature artist, and that's also not the way that I prefer to express myself. I have a certain size that feels like the right fit, quote unquote. And I've noticed too that even though I often do some smaller pieces, often with that sort of thought, well, I need something in different price ranges. Usually that work doesn't even sell that well. And the work that I find the most satisfying in the size that I like to paint in, which is between 48 and 48 inches by 60 by 60 inches, um, which is probably like around 2 by 2 meters, I think, the biggest size. Um, it's just where I feel at home. Just feels like that's the right size. And so, do you have a question? Did you want to
No,
interject?
that actually it actually meanders very, very well into one of the very many questions I have about the mural that you painted.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, do you want to talk a bit about that? Because that was I
yeah.
when I read the size of that, I was so impressed.
Oh, thank you.
I was really impressed. And also, what was it like? Because obviously you were outside during the pandemic. Yeah, could
Yeah.
you talk a bit about your
And
experience and what it was like?
yeah, so with this shift, so I thought I want to paint the faces big. I mean, my painting the faces was always my favorite part anyway, aside from doing the tattoos. I love doing the tattoos. And I had just started painting a little bit bigger, not very big, but 3 times the size of the faces that I had painted before. And I got this email from these people that were doing, helping connecting artists with surfaces around Seattle. And so I was totally fired up. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to try it. And we picked an image that was already in existence, which really, really helped. And, they projected that on the wall so that at least the outline was there. So that helps a lot. I could do it. I've over the years have really trained myself in such a way that I I can use an image like a face that's about this small and make it just freehand, like really large. I've just figured it out how to do it. Um and it was really intense working outside. For one thing, almost nobody was masked at the time, but I took the pandemic very seriously already, like because I was like way more worried, and I had a sense that masks were the right thing, were the right way to go. So later, when I was interviewed for a Seattle newspaper, the guy who was running around doing the interview said, "You were like the only artist who was masked at the time," and mostly I just wore a bandana because I didn't have a cloth mask at the time, but I did still have an N95 from my artwork stuff. And so when I had to work with others that were close to me who helped me with like the background, just to, because you just need to roll paint on in big swaths, and there's no reason that I would have to do it all alone. When those people were close to me, I had like the N95 on. I was like, I do not want you this close to me without that much protection. And there were also a lot of street people out there that, there were people on the streets that didn't even know we had a pandemic. They would come up really close and wanted to find out what I'm doing. And, like I remember one guy, I was just like, get away from me. And I just said, you should see the mural around the corner. And he just took off. I was like, because you can't confront these people going, step away. You could have COVID. Like they were mentally ill, most of them, because people here just we don't have any hospitals for people. We don't have institutions for people. They're crazy people. I mean, crazy, mentally ill people are all over Seattle, just living a horrible life because they don't have any care. Um, so I was exhausted after that. I finished it in 2 days, and it was a little intense, having your back to the street, so you don't really cannot figure out what's going on behind you, and that would be scary in not scary, but a little exhausting in non-COVID times, because as a woman, you're always more of a target, you know, on this anywhere, but especially in the streets. And the neighborhood is a little bit not rough, but has its rough elements. It's kind of, yeah. So, but I was so happy I did it. I got a lot of beautiful feedback for it. People really like the work, and through that I got another commission for another mural. So that was super, super fun. I did that in a restaurant, and so I had the space to myself, which was great. But it was much more chill, but it was bigger than the first one. And so physically, it was a lot of work. I did like a couple of time lapse movies of me working on it. Oh, yeah, yeah. And they're on my Instagram too. You can see them there as well. Yeah. And you just have to go. There's like a series of how I finished the mural. And it just shows how I was like up the ladder, down the ladder, over, up the ladder, down the ladder. I mean, it's just like I just noticed just how much movement there was when I was doing it. It was hilarious, like an ant all day, just. Um, well, I had set up sort of a little bit of a quote unquote barricade, but like there were people that were mad at it, like one unhealthy individual kicked it all over, and um, I had a friend who helped some of the time, and he kind of really kept people he's a guy, and so he kept people a little bit away from me. That really helped. Like I had a bodyguard
Yeah, about to
basically.
say you need to hire a bodyguard, so you should
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
But would you ever consider collaborating with, say, maybe like a graffiti artist or something?
Oh yeah, they should just set up scaffolding and just set them all up in an open area so people can again enjoy free artwork outside in the
Yeah, I
open
was gonna say
air.
it would be great if it was like more of a permanent mural, because that way,
Yeah,
and let the kind of weather and the city, kind of
yeah,
not erode it necessarily, but just grow around it. I think
right.
that'd be great. I think
Yeah,
it seems like such a shame, like so much time and effort and energy put into that, and then it just gets stored
yeah,
away. I think,
exactly.
it's kind of a shame. But then that's like wealthy art collectors, I guess, as well, who just buy work and never show it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's a shame.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree. I agree. I hope they made a book of some of the best murals called oh, I forgot what the title is, but it's on my Instagram as well. And I have a page in there and lots of people. So at least it's kind of like a small coffee table book,
Yeah.
and
So
so
at least it's archived in some way.
documentation. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, of
it's
course. That's
really
what you want. That's exactly what you want.
yeah,
Because there's no
yeah,
point putting all that time and effort, and then it's like, oh, did you even
yeah,
do it?
yeah,
And actually,
exactly.
and so how many artists were participating in it?
You mean in Seattle
Yes.
murals?
Yeah, the murals.
I have no idea, because they were not all. It wasn't like all a centrally organized situation, So there were murals that were just quickly slapped up. I would say there were murals that were done by, you know, artists that already either have um, what do you call it? Not a history. I can't think of, but that already credits in doing murals. Like that's their thing. So it was a really mixed bag of just some things were just terribly quickly just spray painted and globbed on, and others were meticulously executed. So it wasn't like, they were just places that got boarded up, and then maybe artists asked if they could paint them, and then there were specific places that were much more thoughtful about who they wanted to have what painted on their walls, on their boarded up windows. I my place was or is a bar on Capitol Hill called Life on Mars, which is run by a very in collaboration with a very well-known local DJ. So, I think there was already that venue already was kind of arts focused, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
So it helped, of course. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you were to have another mural, would you want to choose where it is?
If I was doing a mural
Yeah.
again,
Yes.
oh, I don't know that I would have a choice. I would be grateful to just get the
Just anywhere.
opportunity. Yeah, yeah. I
I'm
mean,
glad.
take what you can get. And I would do it totally. I mean, the first time was
even I would do it for free, but even the first time we did get some materials that this group had that was coordinating us. And then I used my own paints and I got like $200 paid back, which was really sweet. But I didn't expect that. It was
Yeah.
a service to our city. I felt it was a gift to our city.
And actually, what do you feel about free work? Do you think artists should always be paid for what they do?
No, I think no. I mean, I think artists should be able to make a living. I think there should be much more state support. There needs to be much more support in schools. I think I think universities should be free, just like they are in Germany,
Absolutely.
including art schools. I moved here and I didn't have any student debt, and I didn't even know like just how terrible student debt has become here and what a burden to society that is. And I think nowadays still art just gets neglected. There's all this idea of STEM, science, something, something, and math, and we need art, right? Beauty, whatever that is in the eye's beholder, but art um, is a life essential. Is a must to um, being a human. I mean, that's what distinguishes us from animals. We can create music, paintings, theater, dance, and like so many things, even people that will never set a foot in the museum or into a theater, without them knowing that they are positively affected by art. There is an effect from art that goes in so many directions and is absolutely crucial, let alone that art and artistic thinking is really a way how we need to solve our 21st century problems. And I often have felt that creative people are the ones that are, in the end, the ones that can really make change happen, like political change in particular, whether it's Extinction Rebellion, which really has such a strong effect because of their artful protest, with setting up the sailboat and the red women red people, and all. You're familiar with them, of
Yes.
course, because they are so central to England and London, whereas here it's still like people go, what, who are they? Like, where are you? What rock are you sleeping under? And I've immediately felt drawn to them, and I'm very minorly involved here in Extinction Rebellion. And the the effect also just in sort of creative thinking. Like I think every company needs to have, every political office needs to have artists as part of their committee. It's a real oversight that artists are not involved in city decisions, for example. Like even under COVID, I think artists really easily come up with, like, for example, now that we have all this distancing thing going on, I'm like, why doesn't the city just set up a few pavilions, just quickly build with chairs underneath them, benches where people can just like congregate in small groups, spaced out in fresh air. Like we should just have, people are building them sort of for themselves now, but there's a real lack, especially here in Seattle where it's so wet, and it's just like little things where I feel like an artist would know how to tackle this, like very unconventionally and in a rich way.
Yeah, I think because people who are artists or who are more in tune to creativity, they look at things, a little bit differently than people who may necessarily aren't as creative.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of problem solving when it comes to art.
yeah,
A lot of thinking outside the box, problem solving, and just kind of experimentation,
hmm,
and just kind of trying things and not being afraid to try new things as well, whether or
yeah,
not you get anything good or not out of it. And
yeah.
actually, so do you think that people really value the importance of art nowadays?
I think a lot of people don't. You have to have a certain education, I think, and even then, a lot of people don't, because in a capitalist society, there's still so much the push for just making money, for just being efficient, for just being productive in a way that seems superficially the way we need to do it. And of course, we need to stop with the whole craziness of capitalism to begin with, because it's not sustainable and our planet is dying. But I think that to a certain extent, often only people that have a certain amount of their necessary comforts covered, who are not desperate for food, for shelter, for, who don't have to run 3 jobs in their lives in a day. It's understandable that they can't be conscious around that. It's survival, and so much here in the States is around survival. That being said, usually all layers of society, they for sure love music. They like dance. They see that on their cell phones.
Art's a physical object. Do you think it translates well to a screen?
It translates good enough. It translates enough for people to be curious and to get engaged and to be inspired. In the end, as it is with everything, virtual is only satisfying to a certain level, and then you remain hungry, you remain unsatisfied, you remain unsatiated through digital transport, whether this is connecting with people, whether it is seeing art or music. To be there in person is how we evolved as a people. We cannot live virtually. We will wither. It, like, the pandemic has given us a lot through media, and it's made us way more resilient, and it's been a fabulous soother and band-aid. But we're all so stressed and exhausted because we don't have the physical touch. We don't get to see museums. We don't get see the objects or sculptures in person. I remember we had a fabulous Andrew Wyatt exhibit here, and like so many well-known artists, I was like, I've seen his work all over. I've seen it in books. I've seen it. Do I really want to go see that show? Are you familiar with his work?
No.
He has sons that paint too, and he is an incredible East Coast painter. He's been dead for a while. They're very personal. They might feel a little bit illustrative, but he's not, and that really comes out when you see them in person. And so I went to the show almost before it closed. I mean, it was toward the very end, and I was blown away. I was blown away by the show. It was so emotional. I mean, even right now, I could almost cry. It was such a spiritual experience to see these very personal portraits, interiors, landscapes. They're all around people he knew, around like it was a very tight circle that he depicts. And not only the way they were painted, just like, his ability he did a lot of like dry brush watercolor, which is, I think, super difficult, and oils and egg temperas. And the show was just, it just gave me this like reminder, like, boom, you need to see this in person. Don't think you can get it by looking at a beautiful art book, or definitely not online. It was transformative, and it was too late to see it a second time, but I did send a couple of people there and actually said, pick such and such music, put on the headphones, and go see this show. It was his work appeals to many people because it is so representational. And I think that's maybe why I was a little bit like, yeah, I can see what's there. But the vibration of the work was so magnificent. The energy that came from the piece because of what the painter had laid into it and the time it obviously took, his skill and his emotional ability to lay feeling, story, psychological weight into the work was phenomenal. And it transported back into the viewer. I mean, my audience is mostly women, and it's a lot of younger women, especially with the work that I've done in the last 4 years. But also,
Do you have a specific
with
audience for your work,
the latest
or
work,
like do you paint
it's
with
been
a
really
certain
appealing
person
to
in
men
mind?
too, more and more. I think partly because the figures have a certain sex appeal or have a sexual erotic radiance. And that's something that men are drawn to. I mean, women too, but not always, yeah. It depends on what your sexual orientation is, of course. What I just hope is that the work is not just pretty, that there is an edge to it, that my emotionality is is a I always want the work to be perceived through your viscera, through your senses, not intellectually. Like when I work with my students, because I mentor other artists, I always tell them, don't think about the meaning of it. Don't subscribe symbols or positions or anything you do in your work in advance intellectually. Just let the work happen. If you're just going through the minutia of this means this and I'm going to place that there. I mean, there's lots of artists that paint that way, and you can explain the painting to death. I'm like, why even paint it? I mean, I guess some people, and there's an audience that finds that hugely satisfying. They want to understand every little bit in this piece. And I don't understand my own work, and I sometimes look at it and go, am I just painting Barbies? Is this just like total bullshit what I'm doing? I don't know. I just, I need to satisfy my, 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 my longing for beauty for sure. I don't paint old wrinkly women like I'm slowly becoming myself. And maybe I will someday, but I don't. I just want to paint this beauty, these young women that also in my real life are incredibly inspiring. And I have a lot of young friends, and I, I, I have a daughter, and who I've used as a model, and um, I, I just long to create something that is personal, that is touching something in your soul, that reaches you at a level that's more akin to a dream, that has a symbolism that is personal, that speaks to your own, um, soul makeup, and yet, of course, we're all connected. So whatever I paint, I have been given as in some form as a message, um, through the world, through others, and through what I see and how women inspire me through what they photograph, what they post on Instagram. It's all a connected web, and I'm just expressing it through my own personal filter. I wanted these women to be very, very not, I mean, they're not super confronting, but definitely confronting, definitely confronting the viewer, not looking, some look away, but most of them look straight at the viewer. And they they don't flinch, you know. They are definitely like, I'm here and you cannot push me over or aside. I have something to say, and I am willing to withstand you looking back.
Yeah. So what kind of responses do you get from people with the work?
I get really great responses. I mean, the beauty of the social media is that, of course, for years and years and years and years, like let me see, I've been on Instagram since not that long. Let's see, Ava was maybe 7 years or so at the most, I think. So for the longest time, I was never on Facebook. I mean, I now have an account, but I hardly do anything there. Um, I never had any feedback really. You know, I knew the work sold, or I would have a few people, you know, and friends, and so that really loved the shows and came for the shows and all that. But I really didn't have any feedback. The gallery was always handling the work and the clients, which is just fine by me. Now I have so much like office work to do because I have to like answer all these direct
Yeah.
messages.
There's a lot of admin
Yeah.
involved in just doing anything nowadays.
Right?
There's a lot. If you want to run an art blog, there's a lot of admin involved in that as well.
There is a lot of
There's a
admin.
lot.
There is
Yeah.
a lot of
But
admin.
then I think that's actually that'd be something interesting to talk about. So other than create art, what other aspects what other kind of things do you need to do to become an artist? So like obviously you don't just create art. There's obviously a lot more to it in terms of the business side.
Yeah.
What have your experiences been like, kind of like learning, navigating your way through the business side of art?
You know, it's been beautiful that I've been able to learn all of this like little by little. You know, I had one gallery, then another gallery. With a few exceptions, I've only had the luck to work with really wonderful galleries with people that are absolutely honorable, and I can trust them, and I can rely that I'm getting paid. I don't have to have a meticulous account, what goes in, what comes out. I just leave that in their court, and I trust that things are taken care of, and they have been. And it's been long standing relationships. I would say my Achilles heel is my non-skill of taking really good photos of my work, like really so that they can be published. So I have someone when I need that photographs my work, but I wished I was this is something I could learn, and I just have not wanted to deal with it. And I'm just waiting for cell phones to have a way better lens in them, so I don't have to use my regular camera anymore, because that really does not take. I mean, you have to know how to work that camera, and I've never learned more than point and shoot. And,
Yeah,
and you know,
I'm a photographer, so that makes me sad to hear.
yeah, I bet.
But then again, it's not for everybody, and I understand that. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's pretty
no,
funny.
you really
But
know
that's
how.
definitely something that would be worth learning, just so you know, because one day you may
Yeah,
need to use that skill.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, because the main problem with now the photography is just that I can't get the resolution high enough with my cell phone. Whereas I can get the image to be quite good with an app that helps, you know, make it better, you know, touches up where I fail. Um, and I don't know how to use Photoshop, so just use Snapseed, and that does the trick.
As long as
Um,
it works, as long as it does the
I
job.
love it. Yeah, I mean, for Instagram, it totally works. And you know, once I started with Instagram, I really had to realize how to fine tune this account. Like first, I was just posting whatever, you know, my life, and then, you know, everything. And then stories started to happen, and I started to figure out, okay, this is a nice way to keep that account really uncluttered. Like people who just want to be here for the art, I'm pretty much just giving them art with a few, you know, protest pictures sprinkled in, or a trip or so. But I keep it pretty tidy, and so that I don't bore people who don't want to know who I am behind my art, because I respect that. And then the people who want the gossip or whatever, my personal life, they can just follow my story. And I'm very exhibitionistic, I would say. I share tons of my life. That's the kind of person I am too. I'm a ham. I love being in front of the camera. I've always loved photo shoots. When I was in art school, they had they had a photo studio, so you could rent it. You could not rent it. You could get time in it, and I would do model shots with my girlfriends, um, I'm a huge fan of photography. My dad took his own photographs and processed them, and we always had cold bathtubs running with water and paper, photo paper, and the tiles were glued full of pieces that were were drying, and then we had the press, the hot press to just
That's
lovely. I
amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
love. And I learned how to do black and white photography too. So I love photography. Joel Peter Whitkin, and just like, oh, I have my art collection is my personal art collection is for the most part photography, actually black and white photography. And I don't have a Joel Peter Whitkin, but I have a Jock Sturgis. He's kind of famous. And yeah, and I love so many photographers. So, and then it's just really become a lot because I have over 10,000 followers. And so a lot of people love to communicate with me. And up to this point, I still have enough time to communicate back, and I really, and I really try to give everybody the attention that they need, of if they have, who knows what kind of a question. And what Instagram has allowed me, even though I really wished someone would take over Instagram. Not good that a big corporation owns like that. Well, I had been invited several times to teach at different, weekend workshops or week-long workshops in the mid 90s. And so I did that on and off.
And at what point did you realize did you realize that you were ready to mentor people?
Art workshop. And I injured my thumb in the winter of 2 years ago, whenever that was. And I thought, I have got to find a little side business here to make a little money when I can't paint. I'm sure this is not the last time I'll injure my hand or something. And I just thought, I'll just put it out there and see if anybody hits me up. And it's been really successful. I charge so little, so it's not like it's kind of pocket change. But I've really learned so much from it. And I so love working with my students. I have several in Great Britain, actually. I love that it's women from all over the world. I haven't had a male student yet, and it's probably also because my audience is mostly female. And I have found that I like it much better than teaching groups. I had tried a little bit to promote more of my art workshops, and they were it was very laborious. I was like doing so much effort and getting so little out of it. So I kind of put that, out aside. And thank God with COVID, I was like set. I'm like, this is not changing that part of my job. It was always on FaceTime anyway, or on screen. And, of course, it would be nicer if I could meet these women in person and see their work in person. But for the most part, I've gotten really good feedback that they've gotten wonderful help from me. And I would say I always push all of them to really get into the depth of why they're doing what they're doing, and then how they will do that. I'm not a teacher for technique or just sort of sales or anything like that. It's all about, let's change gear here. Let's make your work more meaningful and deeper, and reveal more of your psyche in your work. And that's kind of what I do. So I'm a little bit of a therapist as I work with them.
That's a good thing though. That's quite nice. I think art should be very reflective of the person creating it. So what do you think your work says about you?
I would love to know that from from you or other people that see it. Well, I don't know really, because that's the part I don't want to research too much. I just know that it always reflects somehow a state of my mind and what I'm dealing with. And so that involves both, like a dream world, a world of interesting critters, which interest me, of mythology, of history, of folk art. It reflects my exploration into womanhood, whether it's my sexuality, whether it's my being a feminist, whether it's where we stand politically as women, um, kind of a universality around the the feminine, spirituality, um, dealing with spiritual growth, with grief, with death, with rebirth. I just wanted to express, or I hope it expresses through again a the filter of art, something that is very individual and unique to me, so that it's very that there's a certain intimacy to the work and an honesty and a authenticity that is really important to me, and I think it expresses how I am. I mean, I want to be authentic. I want to be free and wild and real and have integrity and sincerity. And I'm not making fun of anything. Um, I think that's what it expresses, or I hope it expresses that.
So do you think the best art is personal?
Anything that touches us as people, anything that promotes change or evolution or growth. When we push out just platitudes or political um, phrases or theories or dogmas, um, it gets old so fast. It just becomes propaganda. It's hollow on the inside. Even a work that could be very minimalist, or like Jenny Holzer's work, which is just like, the electronic strips. I forget what those things are called, lighting strips with words on them. Or Barbara Kruger's work or whatever, that is so graphic. But there's something about it that comes from the deep within of these artists. Or, Anish Kapoor's work or so, although he's become, some people are pretty pissed at him with
Yeah,
the
some
whole,
people don't like his work.
but he's he makes beautiful work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, maybe he's an asshole. I don't know, or has some issues with his integrity. I have no idea,
I think
but
part of the problem comes down to a lot of artists that people know of are people like Damien Hirst, Anish Kapoor, people whose work is very widely distributed and very highly priced. And I think people that gives people a very skewed perception of art. And
yeah,
I think that's why people are mad, because they're like, oh, he did, Anish Kapoor did this really amazing sculpture that's like reflective, highly reflective sculptures. And it's just like, people are like, oh, I could have done that. And he probably made quite a lot of money off that. And it's kind of,
yeah,
I think that's probably what it is in terms of people like Anish Kapoor and people being like, oh, no, I don't really like
yeah,
that. When actually he's contributing to the wider realm of art,
yeah,
making art more accessible for everybody, whether you like it or not. Tracy
yeah,
Emin's Bed, for example, whether you like it or not, getting
yeah,
people talking about art, I think that's really the important part of it.
yeah. And I do think that the work that has this personal element of it, that comes from a deeper personhood place, is more effective. Just as if it's purely intellectual labor manufactured into something three-dimensional or two-dimensional, it runs its course pretty fast. It's just not as, I don't think it endures as much, and it doesn't move people as much. Um, but I think what's important is that the that every change, every lasting change, can only happen when we make the changes in us. Like any political structure cannot survive as long as people are traumatized and have not been able to heal some of their emotional wounds. It just very quickly becomes that you have a dictatorship, whether it's left wing or right wing, people that have wanted to build some utopian co-housing, eco-villages, if they don't do the emotional labor, it will break apart. It will fall apart. So again, the individual, their commitment to their evolving as a human is crucial, is the center point, and from there art can be made, a village can be grown, a society can be healthy.
So, considering your own work, would you consider that you create work for yourself or for other people?
That's very hard to say at this point. If I didn't have any more art shows, if my career was done with, then I don't know how much I would create. I really don't know. I don't know until that happens. At this point, I love doing the work. I have always ideas. If I don't have ideas, I need to go on a vacation and just have a break. I'm really driven. I just like when I haven't even finished my current painting and I'm already going, okay, I think I'm going to do the big one and I think I'm going to do this. And, like I start to think about something that I want to do. And like, it's not a big, like, I don't lay it out in detail. I just have sort of some color ideas and some, some thoughts. And I have 1,000 other things that I love doing. I mean, I need 48 hours in my day. I mean, I like sewing. I would so much love to get back into pottery. I'm just creative mayhem.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Have you ever considered creating like mixed media pieces?
I worked a little bit in cast glass at one point. Very, very short. Just I took a month-long retreat where we did that. And I just felt like it was too much process and too little art making. It's like it was being like on a construction site. And then after 3 weeks, you finally have like an itty bitty little thing. Sculpture is really hard. I mean, my pottery is the closest I am doing three-dimensional work, but I've very purposefully separated that from my art making. I just haven't felt like I wanted to delve into that three-dimensionally. I might someday. I really, really love working with clay.
Well, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you.
Same
absolutely.
here.
Can you tell people where they can find more about you and your work?
Mostly on Instagram. I do have a website. I try to keep that really up to date, but it's always a little trickier because I work with the person who helps me run it. And then just the Instagram is really my home port.
And what is your handle?
So it's Anne_Siems_art.
Okay, that's absolutely perfect. That's super cool. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. That concludes my interview with the amazing Anne Siems. Thank you so much for listening today. If you like discovering new artists, then please don't forget to check out the Flying Fruit Bowl website at theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk. We upload artist features 6 to 7 times a week and post written interviews. We also accept artist submissions via the email theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com or by heading to the contact section on the website or by DM on Instagram. So, until next time folks, stay safe.